The old wooden house on the edge of Maple Street had stood for nearly 100 years. It had seen storms, weddings, funerals, and laughter echoing through its rooms. But now it stood mostly silent. The only sounds came from the ticking of the wall clock and the soft shuffle of feet. Those of a young woman named Emma Hale. The sun rose slowly over the small town of Willow Creek, painting the sky with soft orange and pink. Inside the old apartment building, Daniel sat at the edge of his bed, still holding the wrinkled envelope. His hands trembled, not because of the weight of the paper, but because of the weight of the decision he had to make. He had spent the whole night staring at the letter. At times, he thought it might be a mistake, a joke. But the handwriting was familiar, his mother's, clear and careful, the way she always wrote birthday cards, the way she had written the letter he found inside that old box. He finally opened it. "Daniel," it began, "if you're reading this, then it means you've found what I left behind. I'm sorry I never told you the truth. I thought I was protecting you. But now that you're older, I believe you deserve to know everything." The letter told him about someone he had never heard of, a man named Jonathan Blake, a wealthy businessman, powerful, respected, a man who lived not too far away, just a few cities over in Charleston. According to the letter, Jonathan wasn't just any man. He was Daniel's real father. Daniel's eyes froze on the sentence. "He doesn't know about you. I made that choice a long time ago. But if you choose to find him, maybe something good will come out of it." Daniel dropped the letter onto the floor. The words blurred as tears filled his eyes. All his life, he had believed his father had died when he was a baby. That's what his mother told him. That's what he told others when they asked. He had imagined a kind, quiet man who worked hard and loved his family. But that man never existed. His real father was alive, and he didn't even know Daniel existed. Daniel couldn't breathe. He walked out into the hallway, passing neighbors he barely knew. The world felt different now, like it had tilted slightly. Every step he took felt heavy, like he was walking through a dream. He ended up at the edge of town, at the park where he used to play as a child. The swing set was still there, the same red paint, now peeling. He sat on one of the swings and looked up at the sky. "What am I supposed to do now?" he whispered. Just then, an old man pushing a cart of bread passed by. He stopped and looked at Daniel with kind eyes. "You look like someone with a lot on his mind," the man said. Daniel nodded, not trusting his voice. The old man sat on the bench nearby. "You know, sometimes the hardest truths lead us to the best places, but only if we're brave enough to follow them." Daniel turned toward him. "Did someone tell you something like that once?" The old man smiled. "No, I lived it." Then he got up and walked away, leaving behind the smell of fresh bread and a strange sense of peace. That night, Daniel sat at Jonathan's tiny kitchen table with the letter in one hand and his laptop open in front of him. He searched for Jonathan Blake. There he was, CEO of Blake Industries, a man with silver hair, sharp blue eyes, and a strong presence. Married, no children mentioned. "No children," Daniel whispered, "because he doesn't know." He closed the laptop and sat back. He could go on pretending nothing had changed, or he could take a risk. He picked up his phone and called Emily. She answered on the third ring. "Hey, stranger." "Emily," he said, his voice low, "can I come over?" "Of course. Are you okay?" "No, but maybe I will be." At her apartment, he handed her the letter. She read it silently. When she finished, she looked up at him with wide eyes. "This is huge." "I know," he said. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." Emily leaned forward. "You've always said you wanted answers. This might be the biggest answer of your life." "But what if he doesn't want to see me?" Daniel asked. "What if he hates me?" "What if he doesn't?" she replied softly. "What if he's been waiting for something just like this? Someone just like you?" Daniel looked away. He had spent so much of his life feeling invisible, unimportant. But now he had a chance to change that. Over the next week, he wrote a letter to Jonathan Blake. He wrote it and threw it away, wrote it again and again, until finally he folded the final version and placed it in an envelope. No return address, just a note from a man who believed he might be someone's son. He mailed it and waited. Days passed, then a week, then two. No reply. Daniel tried to forget. He went back to work, back to the rhythm of everyday life. But the secret followed him like a shadow. One evening, just before sunset, there was a knock on his door. He opened it and found a man in a black suit standing there. "Daniel Hayes?" "Yes." The man handed him a card. "Mr. Blake would like to meet you. Tomorrow, noon. His private residence. I'll be here to take you." Daniel's hands shook as he took the card. He got the letter?" The man nodded. "He did, and he wants to talk." After the man left, Daniel sat in silence for a long time. Emily came over and they sat side by side on the couch, saying nothing, just holding hands. The next morning came like thunder, fast and loud and impossible to ignore. Daniel dressed carefully. Clean shirt, shaved, his heart beat like a drum in his chest. The car arrived on time. Black, sleek, silent. The drive was long and quiet. Trees passed by like ghosts. When they reached the house, Daniel couldn't breathe. It was massive. Glass walls, a fountain, guards at the gate. Daniel stepped out of the car and walked up the path. The front door opened before he could knock. There stood Jonathan Blake. Older than his pictures, but strong, serious, eyes sharp like ice. "You must be Daniel," he said. Daniel nodded. "Come in." The house was quiet, big, too big. They sat in a sunlit room filled with books and old paintings. Jonathan looked at him for a long time before he finally said, "I wasn't sure if I believed your letter, but then I saw your eyes." Daniel waited. "You have your mother's eyes." Silence. "Did you know her?" Daniel asked. Jonathan nodded slowly. "Many years ago, before I became who I am now. She never told me she was pregnant. She said she was protecting me. She did, but she also took away my choice." Daniel looked down. Jonathan stood and walked to the window. "I've built everything alone. My company, my name, my life. But it's all been lonely." He turned back. "Why did you come?" Daniel took a breath. "Because I needed to know where I came from. Because I've spent my whole life wondering why I wasn't enough for someone to stay." Jonathan's eyes softened. He sat back down. "I'm sorry." Daniel didn't know what to say. For the first time in his life, someone had said those words to him and meant it. "I don't know what happens next, but I'd like to get to know you, if you're open to that." Daniel nodded and the tears came silently down his face. "Yes, I'd like that." The sky turned gray that Saturday morning as Elijah walked slowly up the steps to his grandmother's attic. His heart was still heavy from what he had learned in the library. For days, he had been reading old court records, property sales, and newspaper articles from the 1970s, trying to understand why his grandfather disappeared and what had really happened to his family's fortune. But there were still missing pieces. There was still a hole in the story. Aunt Ruth had once mentioned that Elijah's grandmother, Margaret, used to write letters. Lots of them. She never sent them, just tucked them away. And if they were anywhere, they would be in the attic. The attic smelled like old wood and forgotten time. Dust floated in the air like ghosts, and sunlight struggled through the small round window on the far end of the room. Elijah pulled a string, and a light bulb flickered to life above his head. Boxes. So many boxes. He started with the ones closest to the door. Old holiday decorations, broken toys, baby clothes. Nothing helpful. Then he found a wooden chest. It was different from the others, carefully carved, with a faded gold lock that had long since rusted. He pried it open, and inside were stacks of envelopes tied with ribbons. His hands shook as he picked one up. The first letter was addressed to "My beloved Thomas," dated 1973. Elijah sat down on the wooden floor, dusting off his jeans, and began to read. "My dearest Thomas, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't even know if you're alive. They took you from me so suddenly. They said it was fraud, but I know the truth. I saw what happened. I saw who set you up." Elijah's eyes widened. Fraud? Set up? Was this about his grandfather? "It was Jonathan Miller, your old business partner. I overheard him talking to his lawyer at the bakery. He was planning everything. He knew the factory was failing, but he blamed you so he could walk away clean and take the patent for the machine. The machine you designed?" Elijah's heart began to race. This was it. This was the secret no one in the family had known. He kept reading. "I tried to tell the police, but they laughed at me. A woman? Accusing a successful businessman? They said I was emotional, that I was grieving. They closed the file. I was alone, Thomas, and then when I saw the news that you had disappeared, I knew he had done something worse. But I couldn't prove it. I couldn't protect you." Elijah felt the letter shake in his hands. He had to pause to breathe. His grandfather hadn't just vanished. He had been ruined, betrayed, possibly even worse. The second letter was shorter. "Thomas, I'm tired. The world has taken too much, but I've kept your memory alive. I didn't let them forget you. I raised Ruth and Peter the best I could, but I never told them what happened. I was afraid. But maybe one day someone will find these letters and bring the truth into the light." That someone was Elijah. He sat there for hours, reading every single letter, over 30 of them, all full of pain, truth, and silent hope. He took notes. He copied names. And most of all, he knew what he had to do next. The truth had to come out. The following Monday, Elijah walked into a law office in downtown Chicago. He had called ahead, booked an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in wrongful accusations and family legacy cases. Her name was Melissa Hayes, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a gentle smile. She listened carefully as Elijah explained everything: his grandfather, the letters, the factory, Jonathan Miller, and the patent theft. She looked through the letters with quiet seriousness. Then she leaned back. This is big," she said. "If we can prove the letters are authentic and find any trace of the patent or business documents, we could not only clear your grandfather's name, but maybe even reclaim ownership." Elijah was stunned. "You mean the company Jonathan stole? It could still be tied to our family?" She nodded. "If the patent still earns money and it was originally your grandfather's idea, then yes, legally, it would belong to his descendants, meaning you." Elijah swallowed hard. His family had lived in pain and silence for decades. All this time, his grandmother had held on to the secret like a flame in the dark.
Now that flame had a chance to become something more. That week, Elijah traveled to Millerton, a small town in upstate New York, where the factory had once stood. It was now just a skeleton of a building, covered in vines and graffiti. But across the street, the old town hall still stood. Inside, dusty filing cabinets lined the walls. It took hours, but Elijah found what he was looking for: the original patent for the mag-flow conveyor, signed by both Thomas Harris and Jonathan Miller. But the signature page told a different story. Thomas's name had been scratched out, replaced by a note saying, "Transferred." Beside the transfer was a signature, one that didn't match his grandfather's handwriting at all. Elijah confirmed it when he showed it to her. "That's a forged signature," she said. It was enough to reopen the case. News spread fast. The story of the wrongly accused inventor, the secret letters in the attic, and the grandson fighting to restore a legacy made headlines in Chicago and soon beyond. Elijah did radio interviews, local TV appearances, and even spoke at a small university about family, truth, and how history can be buried in silence. But not anymore. By Christmas, the courts officially recognized Thomas Harris as the co-inventor of the mag-flow conveyor. The Miller estate, now owned by Jonathan's children, was ordered to pay royalties owed to the Harris family for over 40 years. It was a fortune. But Elijah didn't feel rich. He felt free. That Christmas, Elijah returned to his grandmother's attic. He lit a candle and placed it beside the chest of letters. "Thank you," he whispered. "You kept the truth alive." Outside, snow began to fall gently against the windows. But inside Elijah's heart, something had finally stopped hurting. He now knew who he was. And that secret, the one hidden in the attic for decades, had changed everything.
The house was quiet, but Ethan's heart was loud. It beat fast and hard as he stared at the brown envelope in his hand. This was it, the letter he had written to his mother, the one where he told her the truth, the life-changing secret he had buried for years. He hadn't sent it yet. The past few days had been full of questions. After meeting Mr. Harold in the hospital, Ethan had returned home with a heavy heart and a head full of thoughts. Everything had started to make sense. Why he felt the way he did. Why he couldn't look at himself in the mirror without shame. Why he had always felt like something was missing. Because something was missing. Truth. Ethan had always known that his father had left when he was a baby. His mother had told him that his dad simply couldn't handle fatherhood. But the truth was different. His father had not left. He had died. But not in an accident. Ethan had been told it was cancer. The truth? It was suicide. And now he knew why. The secret came from a box in his mother's attic, an old wooden box she never talked about. Inside were his father's journals, letters, and a photo album with a note on the back of the last picture. "I pray Ethan never sees me like this. But if he does, may he find peace in knowing he was always loved." Ethan didn't know what hit him harder, the fact that his father had taken his own life, or the fact that his mother had hidden it from him. He couldn't hate her. She was only trying to protect him. But the truth was still like a storm crashing through his heart. Now, standing by the window, letter in hand, Ethan had to decide. Was he ready to face the truth with her? He sat down at his desk, the one where he used to do homework as a child. He remembered how his mother used to bring him warm cookies while he studied. Those small acts of love, they meant everything.
But love didn't erase pain. It just helped carry it. The letter began, "Dear Mom, I know this may hurt, but I need to talk to you about something I've learned." He poured out everything about the attic, the journals, the note on the photo, and most of all, how it made him feel hurt, lost, confused, but also somehow free. Free because now he could stop wondering why he never felt whole. The secret had explained the silence he had always lived in. He didn't blame her. He just wanted honesty now. He signed the letter and placed it back in the envelope, but he didn't seal it. Not yet. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. His thoughts raced. He wondered what she would say. Would she cry? Would she be angry? Would she finally open up? The next morning, he placed the envelope on the kitchen table before leaving for work. When he returned that evening, the envelope was gone, and his mother was waiting for him at the kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she held a cup of tea, untouched and cold. She said softly, "I read your letter." Ethan nodded and sat down across from her. The silence stretched between them like a wall, but it was a wall both of them were ready to break. She whispered, "I was going to tell you, but you were so young. I didn't know how. Then time passed, and I thought maybe it was better if you never knew." Ethan understood. Gently, "I understand, but I needed to know." She reached for his hand across the table. "Your father loved you. He was just sick, and he was scared you'd grow up thinking he abandoned you. I never blamed him, not now, but I always felt like something was wrong with me." "You were never the problem," she said, holding his hand tighter. "We both tried to protect you in our own broken ways." They cried together for the first time in years. Later that night, his mother brought down the wooden box and placed it on the table. She said, "You deserve to read all of it." And he did. Each letter, each journal entry, brought a piece of his father's soul into the room. Ethan read about the man he had never known, kind, loving, but fighting a darkness that grew too heavy. And in those pages, he also found something else: hope. His father had written about wanting Ethan to grow into a man who lived with truth, courage, and compassion. That night, Ethan made a choice. He would not let the pain stop with him. He would turn it into something that could help others. The very next week, Ethan walked into a community center and signed up to volunteer for a mental health awareness group. He wanted to speak to others who were lost like his father had been. He didn't have all the answers, but he had something just as powerful: understanding. One Saturday morning, he was asked to speak to a small group of strangers. He stood nervously in front of 10 strangers, all with stories of their own. His voice shook as he began. "My name is Ethan. I want to talk about secrets. Not the kind that keep you safe, the kind that keep you stuck." He told them about his father, about the lie, about the attic, about the photo, and most of all, how it made him feel: hurt, lost, confused, but also somehow connected. An older man in the back raised his hand and said, "Thank you. I haven't told my kids I've been struggling for years, but I think I will now." And just like that, Ethan knew. The secret that once destroyed him was now helping others heal. Weeks turned into months. Ethan became a regular voice in the mental health community. His story was published in local papers. His small group grew into a network. People reached out from all over America, the UK, Australia, even the UAE and Singapore. They wrote letters, shared stories, and found hope in his honesty. But there was still one more thing he needed to do. He needed to visit his father's grave. Ethan and his mother hadn't been there in years, but now, with truth in their hearts and healing in their hands, they went together. The cemetery was quiet. The wind carried the smell of freshly cut grass, and birds sang softly in the distance. They stood in front of the small stone that read, David Thompson, loving father, kind soul, gone too soon. Ethan placed a single white rose on the grave. He whispered, I forgive you. His mother placed her hand on his shoulder. And I forgive myself.
Rain poured from the gray sky as if the heavens wept for the years Evelyn had lost. But even with the cold drops sliding down her coat and soaking her boots, she stood outside the little church in Vermont, with the heart so full it could burst. Today, she wasn't here for a funeral or to visit her past. She was here for a wedding. Her daughter Emily was getting married to Ethan, a kind-hearted, grounded man who reminded Evelyn of everything she had once wished for her future. The church bells rang softly, echoing over the quiet countryside. Inside, the pews were lined with white ribbons and gentle candlelight danced against stained glass windows. Evelyn took a deep breath, wiped the tears from her eyes, and walked up the steps. Inside, her best friend Carla waved from the front row. Beside her sat Father Jonah, now retired, but still holding the Bible close to his chest. He looked older now, thinner, with more white than gray in his beard, but his eyes still had the warmth of the man who once helped a broken young girl keep a secret so heavy
it nearly destroyed her. As Evelyn took her seat, the music began. Emily walked down the aisle in a white lace dress, her arm hooked in that of Daniel, Evelyn's childhood friend who had stepped up to be a father figure when Emily was a child. Daniel had tears in his eyes as he looked at the young woman he had helped raise. Every person in the room had played a role in Evelyn's journey. Every face reminded her of a time she thought she'd never survive. Now here she was, not just surviving, but living. After the ceremony, the reception was held in a cozy barn decorated with fairy lights, rustic wooden tables, and large bowls of apple pie and fresh cider. The laughter, dancing, and music made the barn feel like magic. Even the storm outside couldn't break the warmth inside those walls. During the speeches, Emily took the microphone. She began, her voice soft but steady. "There's something I want to say. Growing up, it was just Mom and me. She never told me who my father was until I was much older. When she did, I was shocked, yes. But more than that, I was proud." The room fell into silence. "I'm proud because my mother didn't run from the truth. She faced it. She carried it. And she gave me a life filled with love even when she had nothing herself. Today, I want to thank her for the life she gave me and for the secret she carried alone until she was ready." Evelyn blinked, unable to hold back the tears. She looked around and saw many others were crying too. When Emily came down to hug her, Evelyn whispered, "You are the best thing that ever happened to me." Emily smiled and whispered back, "And you're the strongest woman I've ever known." After the wedding, Evelyn stepped outside for a moment to catch her breath. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, and the air smelled like wet grass and fresh leaves. She walked toward the edge of the meadow, watching the lights of the barn flicker behind her. "You okay?" a voice asked gently. It was Jonah. She turned to him and nodded. "I never thought I'd see a day like this." Jonah stepped beside her, holding his umbrella over her head. "You believed in love even when you were too hurt to admit it. That's what brought you here." Evelyn looked up at him, then out at the field. "I think I'm finally ready to let go of the shame. It wasn't mine to carry." "No, it wasn't. And you never had to carry it alone." She nodded slowly, the words sinking into her heart like soft rain into the earth. She had spent so many years thinking she was dirty, broken, unworthy. But now, in the quiet peace of that meadow, she felt clean. She felt whole. 3 weeks later, Evelyn stood outside a small bookstore in Singapore. She had flown there with Emily and Ethan for their honeymoon. And while they explored the city, she wandered the narrow streets, drawn to old bookshops and little cafes. In that bookstore, she found a memoir by a woman who had experienced something similar to what she had gone through. She read it in one sitting, tears falling onto the pages. And then something inside her stirred. She began to write. Every evening after that, she sat on her hotel balcony or by the pool or in a quiet corner cafe in the UAE and wrote. By the time she returned to the USA, she had outlined her entire story. Not just the pain, but the healing. Not just the secret, but the freedom. She titled her book, The Life-Changing Secret. It took her 2 years to finish it. She wrote through fear, doubt, and memories that haunted her. But with each chapter, she found more courage. She didn't write it for fame. She wrote it for every girl who thought her pain made her unlovable. She wrote it for every woman who had been told to stay quiet, smile, and move on. She wrote it for herself. When the book was published in Canada, the UK, and Australia, it shocked Evelyn how many people reached out. Letters, emails, and even phone calls came from strangers around the world. "Thank you for telling my story," one woman wrote. "I thought I was alone until I read your book," another said. One day, she got a message from a young woman in the Philippines. It read, "I kept your book under my pillow. It stopped me from ending my life." Evelyn wept for hours that day. Not out of sadness, but gratitude. She had turned her deepest wound into a doorway for others. One morning, as she sipped her tea in a small cafe in Dubai, a journalist approached her. He had recognized her from the news segment that aired about her book. "Miss Evelyn," he said, "what gave you the courage to tell such a painful story?" She smiled. "Because I found out that the truth doesn't hurt as much as hiding does. And because I have a daughter who made me want to be brave." Back in the States, she continued giving talks at universities, churches, women's conferences, and even prisons. Her story became more than just a book. It became a light. She started a foundation in Emily's name, The Light Within, a nonprofit that provided therapy, education, and support for survivors of abuse around the world. On the 10th anniversary of the book's release, Evelyn stood once again at the little church in Vermont. But this time, she wasn't just a guest. She was the speaker. And standing beside her, smiling from ear to ear, was Emily. The crowd was full of young women, teenage girls, and mothers. Some came with broken hearts, others came with hope, but all of them came because of her story. As Evelyn stepped up to the podium, she looked at their faces. "I carried a secret for too long. I thought it would destroy me. But that secret became the very thing that set me free. It didn't happen all at once. It took years. But healing is not about forgetting. It's about choosing what comes next." She paused, then smiled. "You don't have to carry your pain alone. You don't have to hide. You don't have to be afraid. There is always light, even after the darkest nights. And sometimes, the secret you thought would ruin your life is actually the key to changing it." As the applause filled the room, Evelyn felt the weight finally lift, not just from her shoulders, but from her soul. She had made peace with her past. She had built a future. And now she was helping others do the same. It all began with a secret, but it ended with something far greater. A life transformed by truth, love, and the courage to begin again.